Baby, we're back. It's the Pod People, the world's premier horror podcast. And I can say that with confidence because it's 2020. And that means that we can say anything that we want. I'm Matisse Van Rossum, and I'm not going to elaborate.
I'm Ben Sheets, a.k.a. Rain Moose, a.k.a. Rico Nasty, a.k.a. Misfit on a Moped, a.k.a. Constable Chromosomes.
Prepared for that one.
Wow, yeah, excellent. My name is Cleveland Mosier, and there's a snake in my boot.
Well, it's been such a long time. Not for the listeners, you just heard us last week, but for us, we haven't recorded in almost a month.
It's been years.
It's been years. We're just back from our holidays. We're ready to burst out of 2020's chest like some kind of alien monstrosity.
Get me out of here.
The first recording of the decade.
The first official recording of the decade, and let me tell you folks, things are already scary as fuck out here.
Aren't they just?
We're about to go to war with Iran. That's happening.
Oh, boy.
That's really... Anyway, instead of dwelling on the horrors of the future, I want to take you guys back to a little year that some might remember called 2019. Oh, how we miss thee.
So long ago.
Feels like a decade ago.
It really does.
This week, we are studying 2019's Last Laugh. We are catching up on the final films of the year that we didn't have a chance to talk about, and this episode is curated by our own Ben Sheets. And I will say, overall, solid picks, my dude.
Yes,
Ditto that.
I'm very happy with this year's picks. I did quite a bit of research, actually, looking into this stuff, and I have to say the two movies that I was considering picking that didn't come out in time are slated for this year. So we'll definitely be talking about those other two, but the three I did pick, The Fanatic, Them That Follow, and Daniel Isn't Real, all are very unique movies that I think I have a good amount to talk about. I don't know about you guys, but...
Yeah, I was really pleased that I did not hate any of these movies. Usually the mid-year catch-up is significantly worse than the end-of-the-year catch-up, and I mean, that was definitely the case in 2019 as well, getting stuck with duds like Greta and The Perfection. And I don't even remember the other movie we watched.
God, why would you remind me?
So we're going to start with The Fanatic, which is the only film I went into knowing a little bit about it. The Fanatic. The Fanatic is a 2019 film starring John Travolta, Devon Sawa, and Anna Golja, but the icing on the cake is that this film is written and directed by Limp Bizkit frontman Fred Durst.
and auteur Fred Durst.
Excuse me. Auteur Fred Durst. The IMDb summary for this is: a rabid film fan stalks his favorite action hero and destroys the star's life. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that is not even close to accurate as what this movie is about. If I had to rewrite this, I would say something more along the lines of mentally ill man abused by Hollywood.
Yes. Stan's revenge, in a way. It's funny because I was looking at some of the IMDb stuff for this, and I didn't realize at the time when I watched it, but Devon Sawa, famous from, Final Destination and stuff, he was also Stan in the Stan music video, which is the funniest turn considering how sadistic he seems in this movie at times.
I'm pretty sure that one of the characters at one point even uses the term Stan.
Oh, absolutely.
And to describe John Travolta's love for Devon Sawa, I got a good little laugh out of that because I was like, it's Stan.
Yeah. I think we should just start off by talking about John Travolta's whole shtick in this movie.
Well, it's important to mention, too, that John Travolta is the first credited producer on this movie.
Yes.
So this isn't the case of a declining actor taking on any role that's thrown at him just in the hopes of staying relevant. This is not a Nick Cage thing. This is something that John Travolta believed in.
Well, and that's something I want to sidebar for a little bit later, in that, like, I think this is kind of a pure distillation of how Fred Durst and John Travolta view fans and their fans and fan culture in general.
Absolutely.
And I think it's really interesting in that respect. But before we get into that, I do really want to specifically talk about John Travolta's batshit, Nicolas Cage-esque performance.
I would say
it is the dedication to the bit.
It is the only reason for watching this movie is John Travolta's performance. I think.
Pretty much. I think some of the ideology is super interesting in that respect.
Sure.
And it is one of those movies that I think fits into the so bad it's good camp.
Yeah, I would agree.
In the memeable sense.
I think it does.
The sincerity is there.
Yes. I think it definitely checks every box. Does it check every box? Well. Or at least does it like really fucking scribble into those boxes like a Troll 2 or The Room? That's where I think it kind of falls a little bit.
Let's readdress that when we do our ratings, because I have some thoughts on that as well. But yes, John Travolta in this film plays the titular Fanatic, who is a 50-something autistic like low-functioning autistic super fan living in Hollywood, trying to make his living doing impressions on the Walk of Fame.
With maybe the wildest haircut.
Yeah, I will say that it's very funny, especially considering who it is performing this character. It is borderline, if not over the line.
I think it's offensive.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't think there's any need like skirting around whether it's offensive or not.
Okay, fair
it's
enough.
offensive,
It's
like,
bad.
does it offend me? No, but it's offensive. The biggest marker for it, which is also I think the funniest thing about it, is that you can never pin down like what degree of mentally ill he is, because you definitely get the vibe that like Fred Durst probably doesn't have that deep of a knowledge.
To me, it just seemed like he was playing like Chris Chan or something.
Well, there are times when like he's relatively like cognizant, he's relatively like able to like maintain a conversation, and then there are other times where like he's stuck like rocking back and forth, completely like incapable of even like simple actions. He's like, all over the place.
It's like the most surface level like high school jock bros interpretation of what mentally handicapped is. Like it's obvious that nobody involved with the production of this film did any research. We use the broad term autistic to describe what John Travolta is, but it's really like not. It's a dash of everything. Like it's autism mixed with like Tourette's, mixed with like schizophrenia. Yeah. Like it's
like ADHD in there, like the way he has to keep moving and stuff.
Two of my favorite things with it is, one, even though it is very offensive, John Travolta is 100% in for the bit.
He's fully committed.
He's 100%.
He absolutely believes.
It's a sincerity. And two, I think he probably pulled from all the very autistic people that he saw and just took their tics that he saw around them without, actually spending any time.
No, he spent a little time on YouTube and like sprinkled a little bit from here and a little bit in this scene I'm gonna do something like this, and in this scene I'm gonna do something like this. Like he quote researched, but it's rough. Like
I agree with you wholeheartedly, though, Ben. What makes it entertaining to watch despite this is the fact that John Travolta is so heavily committed to it. I think, Cleveland, when you and I were watching it in Alabama, I mentioned something that, like, John Travolta was trying to be like John Malkovich in Of Mice and Men. I think he felt that this was that was like, this is the role that he was committing to. Like, he's really method acting.
This was going to be the role that was going to like reignite his career, I think, is like how he approached it.
Meanwhile, less than 5 years ago, he's great in The People versus OJ. Like,
Yeah.
legitimately very well acted.
Well, I mean, John Travolta was kind of the hammiest of that cast.
He was, but I mean, he was playing Robert Shapiro. Like,
Yeah, and the makeup in that show
Yeah.
was pretty bad. But that's besides the point.
Anyway.
In this movie, he really gives it everything, even though for most actors this would be a humiliating role.
Yes.
Especially with some of the things he does.
Let's start with the opening.
Sure, like the 20 production companies.
Yeah,
there were
right, what
titles
was that?
for. There was an absurd amount of production companies on this movie
was.
for such a Z grade straight to fucking red box
Called
movie.
Fred Durst had several cousins who really wanted to be a production company on this. But yeah, the opening sequence, I can't remember what the footage is, but we get like and once again, big old quotes, like noir, like detective style, like opening narration about
yeah.
Moose.
Oh, that was
from
really
this
weird,
female
yeah.
perspective. And
from
it's like
Leah, the paparazzi
Leah.
chick who just enables him, knowing full well that
Right.
he's... We'll get into that.
who we don't see until much later on in the film.
Until like a good 20 minutes later.
Yeah, and then she's just introduced. It's not like presented as any like, oh, this was the narrator. It's so weird. It's such an awkward framing.
The weirdest part of that whole character is she's like an assistant for him, even though, she's supposed to be his friend. It's almost like what I envision Fred Durst and John Travolta to think friends are. They're
Yeah.
just complete like PAs.
Yeah, okay, let's get into her a little bit because she
funny
is
concept, actually.
she is fully culpable, if not downright responsible
Yes.
for every bad thing that happens in this movie.
There's nothing redeemable about her actions.
She's a paparazzo who knows and is quote unquote friends with Moose. Yeah, his name is Moose. I don't know if anybody has mentioned that yet.
But he's in the house.
Rain
Moose is in the house. She completely enables horrible behavior that he has no ability to like process as like things that people should not do.
Clearly in front of her. Like,
Right.
he regularly demonstrates how incapable he is. My favorite thing was that you said during, I think, the second scene with him and her interacting. I can't remember what the fuck was actually occurring, but I remember just you saying at one point, like, because they were like standing fairly close to each other, like chatting or whatever, and you just said like, man, could you fucking imagine how like the smell of him? Like, there's no way, like, she could, like, be that close to him. Like, anyone in the movie could be that close to him and not just, like, regularly gag. There's no way his hygiene is anywhere near, like, reasonable.
The thing about it too is she has such a subservient role to him in the movie. It's
so weird.
Like every scene she's in, she's helping him. She has no like self-interest for the most part in the movie. Like we see like one little bit of her like taking pictures.
Yeah.
Only to be interrupted by Moose, essentially.
And she like gives him access to like the app that paparazzi use to like find celebrity houses or whatever, and she's like, I'm gonna give you this, but don't use it.
Right. What the fuck was that about?
And then when he uses it to find Devon Sawa's house and creepily hang out outside, and then he tells her about it, she's like, I can't believe you did this. I told you not to use it. Bitch, why did you give it to him? Why?
So
He has the brain of a child.
So we have like no one to really care about in this film.
Yeah, that is another big thing. I had no idea who I was supposed to be rooting for in this movie because like the posters and the trailers and all this stuff make John Travolta out to be like the psycho killer, but he's legitimately just like a severely disabled man who is being taken advantage of left and right.
And like, it's not a subversion.
And
like,
Devon Sawa
we
is
see it from the beginning.
almost sadistic.
Devon Sawa is sadistic.
Yeah.
He is not sympathetic.
He is just
at all.
an extremely cruel person in general.
He totally is. Like, he has multiple interactions with Moose coming to him and being like, hey, can you sign things for me? Like, I love your work. And Devon Sawa just being like, hey, why don't you get the fuck out of here, you piece of shit, or I'm gonna beat the fucking shit out of you. This, like, mentally challenged man is just, like, trying to get you to sign something for him. Like, he doesn't know any better. He doesn't know that he's, like, trespassing on your property. Like, treat him with a little bit more understanding, you know?
It almost goes to a comical degree at a
does.
point. I remember there was a point where he's driving and he runs into Moose in the streets.
Yeah.
You know? Like, pedals to the metal.
Almost runs him over.
Almost purple with blood pressure. And blasting Limp Bizkit.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, quick aside for that. He gets into the car with his son.
Oh, that scene.
And turns on the radio, and he's like, hey, you like a little Limp Biscuit? And then cranks it up. And then we've got a scene of him driving around for like a minute and a half to Limp Biscuit. And it's the most masturbatory bullshit I've ever seen.
Yeah. Like,
Get over yourself, Fred Durst. That being said, Devon Sawa's age does about correspond with being into Limp Bizkit when he was like a teenager.
On the
So
on the
in
flip
that sense,
side,
it's believable.
it kind of plays into the ideology thing.
Yeah.
Because do you think Fred Durst sees himself as Devon Sawa when writing this?
Yeah, I think he does.
Yeah.
I definitely think there's a self-insertion there. Devon Sawa is portrayed as like a kind of tortured badass. You know, like the world is against him, like his bitch wife is divorcing him.
Yeah, and he's cheating on her with
his maid.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
But he feels bad about it because I guess she's below him.
Right, exactly. Like
it's that kind of weird ideology too, where like housekeepers are below him because they're the help.
A great expansion on that is when Moose accidentally kills the maid, she's out there lying in the yard for like 3 days before anybody notices her.
yeah, she just gets completely forgotten about by the plot.
In the yard.
The movie forgets about her.
Like Fred
even.
Durst has like a whole day to be at his home, just walking around, like, and he has big backyard windows in his house, which are established, like where he could just clearly see her.
Which is, again, you know, like a trope of a bad movie, but as like a facet of Fred Durst's ideology
It's
and
the
mindset.
perfect metaphor.
It's the perfect
seeing her as
metaphor
invisible.
and so interesting to me because it's like Fred Durst must be kind of sadistic too. He's probably a huge asshole, you know, to his fans.
Allegedly.
He probably sees Devon Sawa as he probably wrote
allegedly,
it. Yeah. Like you said, you know, he probably projected himself onto Devon Sawa in a lot of ways.
I don't think there's like a sense that like the maid was seen as like invisible, to like not regard like her death in any way was like really fucking dumb.
I get the feeling too that Fred Durst like projected aspects of himself onto like a lot of the characters. Like the street magician guy was very
all of the
So
street,
like
very
so stuck in the early
Fred Dursty,
2000s.
yeah.
weird.
Like what was the scene where like he walks into the bathroom and like that character says like,
him
hey
and-
Gaylord or whatever. It's like, what is this, like 2002? Like I haven't heard anyone say that use that insult.
Yeah,
like,
they use some weird slang in this movie. Gaylord and the paparazzo chick call celebrities celebutards.
you said it on the car
Multiple
on the ride back.
times.
What was it, Tease? Like that like Fred Durst is just like stuck in like the
Oh yeah, well I think Fred Durst is 100% stuck in the height of his fame and popularity. So like, you know, 2002, 2003. I think that the structure of this movie is very 2000, early 2000s to me, and just like the way these people talk. Like you said, they're using insults like Gaylord that are like adults are saying these things. And it's like that is like the most sixth grader thing to say 20 years ago. Yeah. It's almost like it's a time capsule. Cleveland, you and I were watching it with several other people, and at one point, like well into the movie, like 30, 45 minutes, I can't remember who it was, says like, wait, is this supposed to be in present day? I thought this was in like 2006.
yeah they thought it was a period piece.
Right. And
well, it definitely does
Because it
seem like
feels
one
like
at
that.
a lot of times.
Because he's stuck in that period. But no, you
because
see
Fred
like
Durst
all
has
sorts
never like advanced past that.
while we're still kind of brushing on the relationship between what's his face in The Maid.
Devon Sawa.
Yeah,
in
with
The
Devon
Maid?
Sawa in The Maid. There's a sequence where we see like a conversation / argument with them where Devon Sawa's character is preparing a smoothie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, Ben, I don't know if you caught that continuity error, but holy shit! Tease, you're the one who spotted it. We almost missed it.
He's having a conversation with the maid in the kitchen while he's making himself a smoothie, and he throws like a handful of kale or something green into the blender, then takes like a spoonful of like mustard or something, throws it in there, and then turns the blender on with no liquid in it whatsoever. And then it cuts to the next shot, and behind him the blender is clearly empty.
Totally empty. Like, so many things wrong with that. Like Christ almighty. Like blends no liquid, just protein powder and vegetables. Like, and then in the next shot it's just empty. And it's like, clearly it just goes to show that like Fred Durst or like probably like no one involved on the production like makes their own meals anymore or something ridiculous. Like, there's just like such like an insane disconnect
Like,
to blend
you're gonna make a smoothie, just
without
put
any liquid,
some green shit in there and some protein powder. Hunter Dunbar's in good shape, so he's gonna be drinking those healthy green smoothies. Fucking real faggot shit.
real Gaylord shit.
Real Gaylord shit. Kind of off topic, but one thing I want to point out before I forget about it is the film starts with a quote. Something to the extent like, "You're a fan, without you, I'm nobody," or something like that. And it's attributed to Hunter Dunbar, who is Devon Sawa's character in this movie.
And he says it later in the movie. It reminds me of that tweet from Little B where he tweets an inspirational message and then ends it with, quote, Little B.
Yes. Yes.
Iconic.
Well, we've got 2 other movies to cover, so we should probably get into some of the meat of this fucking movie, which I would like to talk about the climax when Moose has a crisis of faith after Hunter Dunbar has been mean to him and burns all of his Hunter Dunbar paraphernalia, and then goes to break into his house for some reason.
We should mention it really quickly. We talked about the scene leading up to that with the car, but Hunter Dunbar like threatens that he's gonna like shove a shotgun up Moose's ass or something like that. And
yes,
like,
that's right.
Just way over the top and way over the line to say to anyone, especially an autistic dude, in front of your child.
And like the stab sound when like he writes on his shirt, like,
oh yeah, when he gives Moose an autograph across his shirt and they film it like he's stabbing him. That was an interesting choice. It's established earlier in the movie that, like, Devon Sawa takes a bunch of sleeping pills every night and then gets drunk, so he's, like, a really heavy sleeper. Like, there's a whole montage scene of, like, Moose breaking into his house and, like, taking pictures with him while he's sleeping and, like, watching...
Kissing him on the head.
Kissing him on the forehead and, like, sitting in his living room and watching movies next to unconscious Devon Sawa. So when he eventually goes back later, Devon Sawa wakes up in the middle of the night and he is like exaggeratedly tied to the bed. There's just like so much rope, and it's like, okay, we know that he's a real heavy sleeper, so I'll buy that. But then there's this super long scene of Moose like trying to scare him by wearing different 80s slasher killer costumes. Also, side note on that, when he dresses up like Jason and pretends like he's gonna stab Devon Sawa, but then it's a fake knife, and after that he's like, oh, you scream so good, you're just like Jamie Lee Curtis. I just want to note, Jamie Lee Curtis is not in Friday the 13th. That's Halloween, and John Travolta's character should know that because he's an autistic movie buff. Just gonna get that out there. Fred Durst probably doesn't know the difference, but I caught it. God damn it!
I'd be equally like willing to believe that they wrote that like because he's his character's mentally deficient, like he gets the name wrong or whatever for the person who's in
I doubt
Halloween.
it.
Like, I mean, either way, it's bad. Like, it's bad characterization because again, like that's the one thing his character is as a movie buff. Like, and he doesn't even get that in that sequence. It's
But anyway,
idiocy.
eventually Devon Sawa like sweet talks him, and we have this long sequence that they put a weird like imagination filter over, where they make everything like soft and pink, like while Devon Sawa's talking, and he's talking about how like, I'm sorry, man, I just didn't understand you. You know, just untie me and we'll go wherever you want to eat, and we'll get milkshakes and watch movies together, and we'll be best friends, and it'll be really good. And this goes on for like 5 minutes.
The filter just fucking stays on the screen the whole goddamn time.
And trying to convince Moose
the fuck
to
was
untie
that?
him. And when Moose does untie him, Devon Sawa, still lying in the bed, reaches up out of frame and pulls down a shotgun from nowhere. And
The one just hanging above your bed like
Right.
you do.
yeah, like you do.
Fred Durst ideology.
And then shoots off Moose's hand and proceeds to sadistically torture him for like 5 minutes. And this is where the movie really lost me.
Yeah, like
Because
it was
it's
just like hate crime, like
it was-
weird
it was
bullshit.
like-
It was just like, what the fuck is going on?
It was insanely cruel.
Yeah.
For somebody who's supposed to be like the protagonist of this film or whatever, who is taken captive by a crazy fan, like to then not only blow his hand off, but like shoot on either, like right in his ear on either side to like make him deaf, and then kicks him down the stairs and takes a knife and like punctures Moose's eye. It's like, ew.
Yeah, it was so gratuitous and
it's
unfortunate.
so-
in a
much.
respect, in a way though, I see it as how Fred Durst,
Yes.
aggro frat bro, if someone broke into my house, if a crazy fan fucking broke into my
Yes.
house, man, I'd fucking shoot their hand off and fucking deafen them and then fucking stab them in the eye, bro.
You're absolutely right.
That's
yeah.
definitely what Fred Durst...
That's
It's interesting. Like, I almost read it as like, because like Hunter Dunbar's character is just like fucking like written to be Biff from Back to the Future from the beginning. Like, I did feel like he was framed as like a nasty piece of shit like the whole time. But maybe I'm just like so disconnected from that. Like, I don't know.
I mean, I think he is a nasty piece of shit, but I think that
So is Fred Durst.
Right, exactly. I think that Fred Durst considers him the hero. I don't think the film reads that way. I think
I'd be
that
curious
I
to,
think
yeah.
that the film, just on its face value, I think Hunter Dunbar is the villain and Moose is the victim. Like, regardless of Moose like stalking him or whatever, or breaking into his house or what, like he never actually hurts him.
Well, because I thought like that was supposed to be like
Like-
that's the subversion, right? Like they treat this movie like a horror film.
Like,
and
he kills-
They make you think that like he's gonna like horribly like fuck up Hunter Dunbar, but then the subversion is that Hunter Dunbar is the monster.
He kills the maid, but it's an accident. She's up in his face yelling at him to get off the property, and he has like a panic attack and pushes her, and she hits her head on a planter. Like,
I think the
Hunter
fact that we
Dunbar
have
is
to
the
like
villain.
that we're having this conversation about like, oh, of course Hunter Dunbar is the villain, like, but like
But
whether
I don't
it
think Fred.
is-
I think it's an important
Right,
distinction.
and
I don't think Fred
the
Durst
fact
thinks
that is ambiguous to us goes to show how fucking horribly of a job this film
Yeah.
did at like conveying its message.
But as an artifact, I find that interesting
I agree.
because
Yes.
because
I agree.
it's an aspect where the intent is obviously different than the outcome, but the intent was still, I think, somewhat intentional. I think Fred Durst wrote this in a very particular way.
Yes. Yeah.
And even if it didn't read the same way to us, it's different than, like a lot of your budget, bottom of the barrel trash where like there is no intent.
Yeah.
I think there is an intent there, and I think reading that intent in terms of like how Fred Durst sees these situations is really interesting.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think that this movie serves as a great peek into the mind of Fred Durst.
Yeah.
Personally, I'll keep that door closed.
I mean, yeah, after a peek, I think that I can do without more. Thank you very much. But, you know, like, it is interesting to see that, like, yeah, I think that Fred Durst really does consider fans this way. I think he considers them drooling idiots. And I think that he thinks that Devon Sawa is well within his rights to defend himself in his home the way he did. But it's like, it's not even like he just tried to kill Moose. It's like it's
so goddamn gratuitous.
He was teaching him like a fucked up lesson, and then he like lets him go. And
yeah, that was such a bizarre part.
Right, yeah, he blows off his hand and cuts out one of his eyes and then just like picks him up off the floor and unlocks the door and is like, there you go, bye. And just like shows him out the door. It's like, haha, that'll teach this motherfucker. But then joke's on Devon Sawa because the gardener shows up and finds the maid's dead body and shows up with the cops right after Moose has left, and Devon Sawa is covered in blood and he goes to prison for it. So
even though like forensics like 101.
Oh, I mean, yeah, forensics would like clear him immediately. Like, also he's a rich white celebrity. Like,
right, he's a rich white celebrity. All he has to say is that's not her blood. They have to test it. It's not her blood. And then like it goes on from there. Like Moose is still like hanging around the same places at the end of the movie. Like that's what we see him like in the same Hollywood Walk area. He would be easily locatable. Moose is still going to go to prison. The reality of that situation is still fucked up.
Yeah, well, yeah,
there's
in
no
reality
resolution.
It is. As a smooth-brained metaphor, though, it's the dichotomy of fans, man. They're drooling imbeciles, but without them, we're in a prison of mediocrity.
Whoa.
And I think what Fred Durst really considers like the very poignant message at the end of the film is that when Moose is walking around his old haunts in the Hollywood Hall of Fame, like covered in blood with like his eye oozing out, like people come up and want to take pictures with him because they think he's like wearing movie makeup. So when before he wasn't able to make any money, now people are approaching him, and it's like
for a few days.
Well, right, yeah, until like 20 minutes later when somebody's like, oh my god, and like calls an ambulance. And then what's he gonna do? He's not gonna be able to get back out there and work missing a hand and an eye. Well, and like you said, you know, basic forensics will probably tell that like what the true story of what happened, and you know, Moose ends up in prison, and the legal justice system is not kind to the mentally handicapped.
But tease, they had a cute cartoon with Moose as a pirate with an eye patch and a hook with the paparazzi.
What was that? Oh my god.
Yeah, that style was I honestly didn't hate it, but it wasn't great.
It didn't fit the movie.
No, it didn't. It was very out of place.
Yeah, it was always very strange. It definitely didn't make sense.
I'm willing to bet that the guy who did those art sequences was one of the entire production companies at the opening credits too. I'm just wanted to say.
Yeah, his logo is up there. You're probably right.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be surprised.
I believe that. Well, do you guys want to rate this and move on?
Yeah, we might as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll start. What I will say is I definitely think that this falls into so bad it's good material. I would say that it's worth a watch. I don't know how readily I would go back to this. Like, even if I was trying to show my friends, like, a so bad it's good movie, there's such a laundry list of other ones that I would pick before this one.
Boom. Yes.
But I did enjoy this movie as sort of like a look into the twisted mind of Fred Durst, and I gotta give John Travolta credit for really committing to this absolutely offensive, insane role. So, you know, overall, I enjoyed my time with this movie. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5.
All right. Well, yeah, it's super interesting. In a way, I feel like John Travolta's on a roll between 2018's Gotti and 2019's The Fanatic.
Fuck, dude. Gotti.
Unlike Gotti, I think this movie is way better made, and in a lot of ways less bad. It had me cackling at sometimes, you know, when John Travolta is running around with the moose horns.
Moose is in the house. Moose is in the house.
With his constable outfit.
Oh, God.
There's some classic moments
Hello,
in here.
Governor.
Poppycock.
Oh God.
Poppycock.
I don't trust anyone who gives this movie like 1 star. I don't think it's that bad.
No, it's definitely more
and
fun
I
than
think
that.
it's way more entertaining
I
than
don't
that.
trust anybody who gives us a 5-star either.
Yeah, I don't either. No, I would probably give it a 3. I think, you know, it is a so bad it's good movie, and I think if you're gonna pick a late night watch with friends, get drunk movie, you could pick much worse than this. This is a pretty solid choice.
Funny that you bring up Gotti, though. I think I would choose Gotti for a late night drunk bad movie over this one. Jesus Christ.
This one's
Anyway,
more coherent than
way
Gotti,
more
but that's a
coherent.
very low bar.
That's part of what makes Gotti such a fascinating view. Anyway, Cleveland, your rating.
Yeah, so I really don't know what you guys are talking about. I think that this movie was an absolute affront to society, and that both Fred Durst and John Travolta should be canceled immediately.
Executed, even.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Drag them out into the streets. Draw and quarter them. I say for this offense, and I definitely give it 1 star. No, JK. I thought it was fun. I thought it was fine. For like a so bad it's good. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, like I think it checks every box, but it doesn't like fucking scribble into every box like a Troll 2 or a Room. I would much rather just watch The Room again. There were some very funny times, like the Smoothie Machine, etc. Or Blender. Smoothie Machine.
I mean, that's accurate.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like someone who doesn't know how to operate a blender would refer to
Devin
it as.
saw
I think in the script it's Smoothie Machine.
Let me throw some kale into the smoothie machine.
and raw powder and nothing else. I give it a 2.5. It was fun to make fun of. It was fun to laugh at the clown.
All right.
That is Fred Durst. And
Well,
there you go.
As an
Allegedly.
artifact, you know, you're not going to get a more firsthand account into how celebrities view their fans than this movie. That's
Yeah.
how I'll capstone this one.
Absolutely. All right, well, that'll give the Fanatic an average of 2.8 out of 5 pods. Moving right along. Our second film that we're going to be talking about, as Ben mentioned, is Them That Follow, which is a film directed by Britt Poulton and Dan Madison Savage.
It's their directorial debut.
I think it was a savage debut.
Starring Alice Englert.
Who's the daughter of Jane Campion.
Well, wait, there's
Oh, really?
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Also, Olivia Colman, Walton Goggins, and Thomas Mann.
And Devers, what's her name?
Dilly?
Caitlin? Yeah.
Caitlin Devers.
Caitlin
yeah.
Devers. She was in Booksmart. She was one of the leads
That's
in
right.
Booksmart.
She has a higher billing than Alice Englert, even though Alice Englert is absolutely the main character and Caitlin Dever is not.
Yeah, well...
But also bit part by Jim Gaffigan, which is really strange. We'll get into that. The synopsis for this film is set in the deep wilds of Appalachia, where believers handle death-dealing snakes to prove themselves before God. A pastor's daughter holds a secret that threatens to tear her community apart. I thought this movie was pretty good.
I fucking loved it.
I thought it was pretty solid. I think what I will say right off the bat is I think it's an okay movie, elevated a ton by a stacked cast. I think if this was without that same cast, it wouldn't have been nearly as good.
Well, no, I mean, but the film is like featured around like character performances.
I think I'll agree with
so-
you. I'd say the script is serviceable, but
that's like saying like a
little
Godzilla movie
generic,
wouldn't be
you
any
know?
good.
I
with the
think-
effects.
serviceable, generic, but the acting is very solid across the board.
It's extremely good.
I also would say that of the three, this one is least deserving of horror as a qualification. I think that there are a couple of scenes that might be horrifying, but it's much more of like a drama, psychological thriller.
I was asking myself that about halfway through, but I felt by the end it better justified that.
Yeah, and
like
it's
horror.
very atmospheric. It's a very slow burn. You
I
know,
think the cinematography was beautiful.
the
Really well
whole
shot.
the whole first half, not much really happens. It's a lot of world building and getting to know the characters.
It's really interesting subject matter. It's about like a small like Pentecostal community living in like the mountains of, somewhere in the Appalachians, West Virginia, Tennessee, somewhere thereabouts. And like Pentecostals are, I think, really fascinating as a study because they're the ones who do like handling venomous snakes and speaking in tongues and shit like that. And I think that kind of community is a really fantastic setting for a film like this.
Yeah, Tease, I remember you mentioning to me at some point that that's what the plot line was, and I said this then, and I went into the film with this sort of singular expectation, and that's like there's a lot of cult horror movies, and not like cult following, but like horror films about cults. Mm-hmm. All I wanted going into this film was to see some homework done. I wanted to get something that maybe felt a little more genuine, that felt like they'd really done their research on like that lifestyle. And I felt very gratified by the end for that. Like, yeah, I was very pleased.
I would agree to the point where I would say that I think it's a disservice to call the group a cult. Because
yes.
I don't really think
God, you're so right. You're so right. Like, they're all very genuine, believable people, and it's hard to necessarily put.
If anything, it's just devout to the point of being a little suffocating and claustrophobic.
And making some bad decisions because of it. But
and
they're
they're honestly, like, they really seem like earnestly unaware of like any negative effects they have on anyone, like considering like their devoutness.
They're true believers.
That's so hard to do. Like, it's just so hard to not make that like a Snidely Whiplash character, like just the super devout person who like of course like commits evil. Instead, it's so banal, like and insidious the way that like it affects our main character. I was
kind of expecting something akin to The Sacrament going into this one, and it definitely is not that. And I would say that to its benefit. I love The Sacrament.
That's a movie we should talk about at some point.
I agree. I think that for what this film delivers, it does a really good job. It's more centered around like a couple of like young people's like crisis of faith set in a extremely, like you said, devout community of true believers who are completely unshakable in their own faith. So like even just like the slightest little bit of doubt like really makes you an outcast. And I think that the film handled that quite well.
Oh yeah, extremely believable.
It's kind of generic, centered around like Mara, who is pregnant out of wedlock with
Augie, who's fallen out of the church,
right? Who doesn't believe, and like them
because the poor guy's just trying to get the fuck out.
But his parents are very devout.
His parents are very devout, and Mara's father is the pastor. Yeah, Walton Goggins, who nailed it out of the park.
Fucking nailed it.
Very good. Yeah. I mean, he's kind.
I will say,
I know what you're gonna say. I know exactly what you're gonna say.
Seeing this post Righteous Gemstones really affected it in a weird way.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he's typecast.
Here's the thing. Like both Walton Goggins and Jim Gaffigan had to get over being either like Reverend Uncle Baby Billy, or just fucking beyond the pale Jim Gaffigan.
This movie came out before Righteous Gemstones.
Yeah,
it did. That reference wasn't there when they were shooting per se.
But Righteous Gemstones puts a very interesting hindsight.
Yes.
Fortunately, like Uncle Baby Billy's character has got. I could say that name,
Uncle Baby Billy,
like every sentence for the rest of my life. Uncle Baby Billy's character is like covered in like white makeup with his hair and like the big glasses and stuff, and he's so cartoonified visually as well.
Yeah, Baby Billy is a caricature.
Yeah, Walton Goggins like just looks like Walton Goggins in this, and so it's much more of a person, and he's just so genuine and human that like it was pretty easy to step outside of that.
I think he gives a believable performance in this too. Like as a Pentecostal preacher, he's very over the top, but sort of by his nature, like it feels real. Like having known some Pentecostal people, like it's believable. Like he is somebody who truly believes that like he is the vessel for like God's will. And I buy it, but it is hard to not think about Uncle Baby Billy.
Yes.
Let's just quickly cover Jim Gaffigan because I don't have a lot to say about him in this movie. because for as high a billing as he has in this movie, he does not do a whole lot.
No,
I really appreciated how background he was at the beginning. I was just like, wait a minute, is that Jim? Yes, it is. And then he was out of the scene again.
I mean, I don't have a problem with it, but it's, when somebody like a comedian gets like high billing for like a, serious movie or a horror movie or a dark movie, they're usually like a bigger part of it. And Jim Gaffigan was totally background in this whole movie. And I'm not like I want more Jim Gaffigan, but I'm like,
you just thought it was strange.
it was just like, yeah, why are you gonna why are you go out of your way to get somebody like Jim
well, his
Gaffigan?
character is an important character,
And his character also
at the
like
same time.
is the kind of like he's the kind of father who like tries his utmost to stay in the background, which I think is what makes like his actions towards the end like so much more powerful. Is like he has to kind of like step outside of himself to do that. You just get a vibe that he's not a very social person. He doesn't want to interact with too many people.
Well, let's remember,
and like he kind of and that's sort of why his son he's letting his son get away from him.
He's literally reading the Bible in every scene.
Well, let's remember too that Augie fell out from the church, and that's why they were so distant in the movie.
I do want to say before we dig too deep into this that I wasn't worried about with the Fanatic, but like with this one, like definitely if you're listening and you haven't, I would recommend seeing it, like, because I think not knowing what's coming next in the film like was one of the more satisfying aspects.
Sure.
For me.
I mean, yeah, our usual shtick, like spoilers. If you don't want the movie to be spoiled, go see it before you listen to us talk about it.
Of course.
So Olivia Colman's character Hope is Augie's mom.
She's great.
And she does a fantastic, maybe my favorite performance in the movie. She strongly suggests to our main character to get married.
Yeah.
To what's his name?
Garrett. I don't remember the actor's name, but yeah, I got the impression that Mara agrees to do that so readily so she can hide that she is pregnant before she's married.
Yes.
It's like she's obviously in love with Augie, but there's this other guy who like her father likes who has asked her to marry him, and you get the feeling that she does it just so it's like, okay, we're gonna get married, and that way once I start to show I can say like, oh yeah, it's obvious just Garrett's baby.
Like she's just being held hostage by like social parameters. Like it's so fucked. You really feel for her.
Similarly to like Thomason in The Witch, you get the impression that she is also a true believer who is really just like trying to come to terms with her sins, quote unquote, and like whether she is capable of redemption in God's eyes, and kind of having to come to terms with that, which I think is a very interesting foil for Augie, who even says early in the film is like he calls it her father's religion, like it's not his religion. He wants out of it, he doesn't want to be a part of this community anymore. So for him to sort of be held there by her, she does have true faith. I think it's a believable hook for him, I think.
Oh yeah, and it makes her like her rise by the end like so much more gratifying because she really does have to come out of it.
Yeah.
In that sense, and it's legitimate means that are thrusted upon her that force her into that, and she just does it through strength of character. And that's like, God, like that's a feminist movie. Like I can like extremely get down with, like she's just a strong like person. She's doesn't just become strong because like it's a fun concept. Like it really does feel like organic. Yeah, I can't say enough good things about this movie.
Olivia Colman's character, in preparation for before the wedding is official, she does a virginity check.
Yep.
Which is
not uncommon,
very uncomfortable scene.
Yeah, and she can tell that Mara is pregnant, but she assumes that it's Garrett's, and they just got a little ahead of themselves and consummated before the wedding. The ultimate conflict of the film is, Mara kind of pushing Augie away, and then, him realizing that she needs him more than he needs to be out of there. So he tries to come back into the church and at least fake it for her sake, and gets snake bit because that's the way that Pentecostals deal with tests of God is to handle rattlesnakes and pit vipers and shit like that.
Right. And also,
Which is wild.
we get the opening near the beginning of the film, too, where we don't see it happen, but apparently there was like a kid who was snake
Somebody else who, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and the cops come and deal with that.
There's multiple instances of them talking about stuff like that. Like, for example, Dilly's mom disappears.
Yeah.
But it's pretty apparent that in my view, that she was killed. She died from snake bite.
Oh, interesting. I actually read it the other way, that she got fed up with the religion and ran away.
Yeah, that she got out like her, and so she's sort of following those.
Yes, because there's the scene where Walton Goggins comes to her trailer and says like, "Hey, you're gonna come stay with us, but that means you got to leave your mother behind."
Oh, I love both of those readings into it. And I really like that it's ambiguous. Yeah,
I think either of those are equally likely. That's so interesting
because it changes your perception like going into the film, because you learn that like about midway through, right? Like you get that information, and so that's coming up on the point where she could die from being snake bit, or she could get out of there and escape. And it's cool like how that back lore is reinforced by her own story. So let's talk about the scene where he gets snake bit. I watched it twice because like there's a lot of industrial sounds. Like the score is fan-fucking-tastic in this film. And there's a lot of industrial noises and effects going on in the scoring during that scene. And they throw him in the back of the truck, and the truck takes off. And I was like, wait a minute, was that a truck muffler or was that a rattlesnake tail? Interesting. And I was like, I need to know. So I ran it back again, and I listened really close. I just closed my eyes and just listened to the audio of that scene.
Is it both?
And not only that, but every industrial overlay and sound in that is snake sounds. Like it's all like the samplings of like snakes hissing or tails rattling or like them sliding over things. Like, and it's all done like to the point where it's not so distorted that you can't hear it. But if you stop and you listen to it, it's like the highs, the lows, the mids, they're all snakes, and it's awesome. And so you hear like the rattling and stuff like when the truck is leaving as well, and just it tails off at the end there, but it's so well crafted. Like I love it.
Well, and that brings us to honestly the most horror centric part of the movie, watching
for sure.
Augie slowly die of poisoning
because they don't believe in medical
as
treatment.
He gets worse and worse.
Well, I mean, not
Thoughts
only
and prayers.
not only do they not believe in medical treatment, but also if he were to go into town to get help, then the cops would come back up. We get through some conversations that the police are constantly harassing their community because people keep
following them.
Yeah, because people keep getting bitten by venomous snakes and dying and shit like that. So we're told that the cops have more than once come into the church and raided it and taken their snakes and stuff like that. That whole part is extremely harrowing. Augie, who is at that point like mask off, like fuck it, I don't believe in this, like please just get me to a doctor, and his parents being like, no, we can't take you to the doctor, this is God testing you, we just have to pray over you. And it's like days of him just like lying in bed in agony from snake venom. And that scene where then they leave and he gets his knife and tries and cuts open the wound and tries to suck the poison out. That's probably the most like
yikes.
That's probably the most like horror scene in the movie. That was
great effects.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like really like deep, rich black blood, like it really looks like it's been poisoned. And oh man, when it's like necrotized later too.
Well, and then they decide to cut his arm off, and they just do that in their house on the dining room
with
table.
A sawzall.
Yeah, with a fucking sawzall.
Like Jesus, when he walked in with that, I was just like, no, oh no.
Yeah, like,
and it's just out of like necessity and circumstance, because that's like they're just they're a poor mountain community. Like that's the tool that they have for the job.
Yeah.
Like and it would be oh god, yikes.
That whole sequence is when the movie really picks up steam. It's pretty slow up until then, but I think it's a worthy build to that part, because that whole like from when Augie gets bit on is just like so tense. Garrett finding out that Mara's pregnant with Augie's baby, and then her dad finding out, and the whole confrontation between them is
the rape attempt.
yeah, he tries to rape her in the kitchen of her own house, and Walton Goggins hears her screaming and comes in and gives Garrett the rightful fucking thrashing that he deserves. Like I was rooting for Walton Goggins to shoot him in that scene when he goes back and gets his gun. I was like, yeah, fuck this dude.
Yeah, it was so well
Fucking
scripted.
shoot him. But I really like that scene too, because it very much affirms Walton Goggins' humanity. He's not just like a cartoonish cult leader, crazy preacher.
He's really trying to do right by his own beliefs.
He's trying to do right by his family, and he loves his daughter and, wants to protect her, but the direction that he's coming from is misguided in many ways. Especially after that, he takes her to be quote unquote cleansed to handle a snake, which is another fantastic scene.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, he's not a caricature in that, there's still room for forgiveness in the religion he believes. It's
Yes.
just he believes it has to be cleansed
Right.
with the snake, which is a really interesting scene. I really like how they shoot it with so many close-ups
Yeah.
of the snake and all the quick cuts.
Yeah, I would say if you're afraid of snakes, this is probably not the movie for you, because there's a lot of snake action in this movie. But that scene is very powerful of her overcoming her fear of the snake, and you get the impression that it's not through religious devotion, but just through sheer force of will. Because after that, she's like, I've conquered this. I'm going to go take Augie to the hospital. And Walton Goggins is like, if you walk out of here, don't you dare ever come back.
And you get a vibe too that like he regrets the words as he's saying it.
Yeah.
Like what fucking masterclass shit is that to deliver a line that way where it really sounds like as soon as he says it he regrets it, and not like a cartoonish manner too where his eyes go wide. He stands by what he says, but he knows he's already fucked up by
well,
by
I
saying
mean,
that to
also
her.
just like the sort of sobbing sigh of relief he gives, when she takes the snake off
Yeah.
and puts it back in the in its case, like that he was really, really wanting her to come out of this okay, like he was not putting a snake on her as punishment, but what he truly thought was a religious test, a cleansing.
And like honestly, I was spending so much of this film just like waiting for the moment where there's a basement and there's like some fucked up like wacky ritual or whatever, and
Yeah,
I was
something real
so
culty. Yeah, it
something
never
real
happens.
culty with
It never
candles
happens,
and all
yeah.
thing, and I was just so glad with the direction it went.
It feels very real.
Yes.
I agree with Ben that the plot can be a little bit generic, kind of by the numbers, but it at least feels authentic.
The thing is though is like it's a character study of a very simple people. Those things can happen that way, and for that I appreciated it. Like I mean it's about it's just a character study of them that follow like that word.
It's aptly titled. For
Yeah, God, it works so well for that.
I think it really is elevated by both the incredible acting and I think a lot of the snake bite stuff, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot more to say about this movie. I thought it was pretty solidly made.
Yeah, I'm fine going ahead and rating if you guys are, unless you have other stuff. Why don't you
Yeah, I'll
then,
start. I think without the cast it has, would have probably been middle of the road for me. Especially after talking about it, though, it definitely is elevated a little more. I was coming in planning on giving it a 3, but I think I'm gonna give it a 3.5, just because I think the acting's really strong. I think while the story itself is a little bit generic, it's really elevated by the acting and some of the craftsmanship of the film. So
Yeah, no, I enjoyed this film quite a bit. It's a slow burn. I found myself getting a little bit bored at times, but the climax really pays off, and I really liked all of these actors, both the ones that I knew and the ones that I didn't know. Really solid performances across the board. Very interesting subject matter, great atmosphere, beautiful cinematography. I'm going to give it a solid 4 out of 5, I think.
Nice. Yeah, I'm largely going to pair with that. As I've said many times before in the podcast, I love a slow burn. I love like just long pauses between scenes with like atmospheric shots and music. It delivered that in spades. I really appreciated just like how little happened at the beginning. Like the film didn't try to like hook you with like, your standard like marketing tactics or anything else. It just let me like
It does
live in
character
this society.
development.
Exactly. Like it let me just get to know the people as people before like any large stakes made themselves apparent. God, I can't appreciate that enough. I think the more I talk about it, I was originally just gonna go for a strong 4, but fuck it, 4.5 for me. I really like this movie, and I'm definitely gonna watch it again at some point.
All right, well, that'll be an average of 4 out of 5 for them that follow. Okay, so our last film for the evening is the one that I knew by far the least about going into.
Trevor
so-
isn't here.
So, curating this, I went out of my way to pick a movie that was so bad it's good, a very self-serious slow burn, and schlocky, stylized, fun horror movie. And
We
I
had
think
nothing if not variety.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think we accomplished that.
I think you did.
Yes, so our last film is called Daniel Isn't Real, directed by Adam Egypt Mortimer.
What a name.
And
What a champion.
starring Miles Robbins, Patrick Schwarzenegger, i.e. Arnold Schwarzenegger's son, Sasha Lane, and Mary Stuart Masterson, or as I will call her, Discount Robin Wright.
Oh yeah. God, I was thinking the same thing.
And it's about a troubled college freshman, Luke, who suffers a violent family trauma and resurrects his charismatic childhood imaginary friend Daniel to help him cope, not realizing how dangerous Daniel is. This was a Shudder exclusive. I can't believe that for this podcast we still have not invested in a Shudder account. Maybe one of these days. But I really liked this movie a lot.
I had a blast watching this movie.
I thought it was good.
I won't spoil the twist just yet because we still have some stuff to talk about. But this movie is so good at tricking you into thinking it's something that it's not.
Sure, yeah, I would agree. It wears its influences on its sleeve, but
sure.
not in a bad way. You
No,
know,
not at all.
I think it's very clearly inspired by things like Fight Club with the second personality and stuff like Mandy in terms of style.
Jacob's Ladder
You
was the
know.
one
Jacob's
that
Ladder,
really hit for me.
big one. Hellraiser also, especially I would say Hellraiser 2. A lot of stuff pulled from that.
A little Hereditary in the second half.
Yeah,
with
yeah,
some
yeah.
of that stuff.
Well, it presents itself as a just sort of like highly stylized modern take on the Jekyll and Hyde split personality story, you know, struggle with mental illness kind of thing. And by the end, it has become something completely different in a way that I did not see coming, but also really appreciate it.
Yeah, I really respect the balls of this movie.
I would like to say that I thought the acting was pretty damn good,
Yeah.
especially from the two leads, Patrick Schwarzenegger and what's the other guy's name? Miles Robbins,
Oh yeah,
who plays Luke.
he stole the show. He was so charismatic. I was very surprised and pleased by his performance, and I definitely want to see him in more stuff.
I thought Patrick Schwarzenegger as well gave just an excellent performance as Daniel.
Oh, he rocked it.
Yeah,
Totally.
he was.
That's what I was saying. Like I want to see
Hamming
him
it
in
up a
more.
little bit.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about our
Miles
main
Robbins,
character.
yeah.
But yeah, he gives it 110% at times, and I really appreciate it for that. One of my other favorite actresses, Sasha Lane, who was in this fantastic movie American Honey. One of my favorites of the decade was in it as the artist eccentric girlfriend character. I think she did a pretty solid job in this as well.
What else has she been in? Was she in Hellboy?
She was in Hellboy.
Okay, I thought so.
Yeah, minor
That's where I've
character.
seen her before.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of. Yeah, I barely remember anything about that movie. Yeah, she was. Yeah, I thought she did pretty good as well. One of the things that I was kind of on the fence about at first, but then really grew to appreciate, is that the dialogue is super corny to
I was having a bad time.
to the extent of
Really?
Yeah.
satire. Once I realized that I think that a lot of it was satirical, I started enjoying it a lot more. I was
Yeah.
taking it a little bit more seriously at first, but especially like once like Daniel has reemerged and we start seeing how he's like helping Miles like navigate college and get girls and shit, and like you're being introduced to these like super self-serious young yuppie New York type artist types. That shit is when I was like, okay, the reason the dialogue is bad is because it's supposed to be.
Well, I mean, yeah, like look at Sasha Lane's art.
Yes.
You know, it's very taking the piss out of those type of people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, like, and also just accurately portraying. And I think why I thought it was poor at the beginning was because, like, you know, I've been in and out of Brooklyn and that whole fucking scene, and they really nailed it to the degree that I thought it was made by people who felt that way about it. And I thought that, like, it was, like, actually just trying to, like, honestly portray it, like, with love and not necessarily with the degree of, like, sarcasm. And that's why I was just like, oh, this dialogue is awful. Like, they feel like they're being really smart and they're being framed, like, trying to sound like they're really smart when they're talking about society. But no, it was, like, the director, they were self-aware. But it doesn't come across as self-aware at the beginning to me. So I was like not having a good time. And like I think at one point like I mocked something like kind of loudly while we were watching it, and Tease, you just like across the room was just like, I don't know, man, I'm having a good time right now. Like shut the fuck up.
the part that really hammered that shit home for me is when Luke meets the film chick at the party, and he's like, he says that she looks like some I can't remember what he
The
says.
actress from Pandora's Box.
Yeah. Some starlet of the silver screen, and he's like, oh yeah, you must study film, and she's like, I watch films. I study psychology. And that was the line.
I was laughing.
That
hard
was
at
the
that.
line where I was like, where I tipped it over into like, okay, this is satire. There's no way.
Well, I thought it portrayed that tone fairly well from the jump, with how silly some of the early stuff as a kid with
Sure.
Daniel were.
I was enjoying all of that
with
stuff.
that stuff.
I was enjoying all that stuff, but for that part, I think I was enjoying it for the wrong reason. I was enjoying it in like a so bad it's good kind of way, like schlockiness. And then later I caught on to the intent and I started to appreciate the craft a lot more.
I definitely missed it from the beginning, and I don't think it's the film's fault.
Well, I think it's such a turn with Daniel as a kid when he gets jealous and tells Miles' character
Lucas,
Luke,
yeah. When he tells Luke to put tons of pills in the blender
To give his mom a superpower.
Yeah.
Which is
and
fine,
his mom's smoothie. I mean, that's in the interesting, that's when you see that something is wrong with Daniel. We know at that point he's imaginary, but that's when there's, a really big problem. No, I thought that was great.
I think it set the tone for what we were getting into fairly well.
Yeah,
and
sure.
on top of that, even before that, the scene right near the beginning of the movie where there's the shooting at the coffee shop.
I think it's the very first scene. I think it's the first shot. Yeah.
Is what a way to start a movie.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it just knocks you right off your feet
Yeah.
immediately. Well, when Luke passes the crime scene and we just get that hard cut from his face to like the shooter's, bullet riddled body on the sidewalk, and then cut back and Daniel is there. I think that's so great, is like, that is the moment where, well, at least as we initially think, we find out later it's different, but at that moment it's like, well, okay, that's when his mind snapped.
Yeah, there's a moment of trauma, so his brain develops this character for him to cope with
so
it.
he creates
Coping
an imaginary
mechanism,
friend as a coping mechanism, and like then we see that the trauma runs deeper because his imaginary friend tells him to poison his mother, and then we get the scene of her telling him to lock Daniel inside the dollhouse, his grandmother's dollhouse, this crazy elaborate like big thing. Love that prop.
The dollhouse set and the inside with the strobing.
Oh yeah, with the strobing red lights.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. And then we jump forward in time to Daniel and his like at 1920, and we see that his mom is like suffering pretty badly from schizophrenia. So then it's like, okay, all right, well, there's some mental health issues that run in the family here. So the film is going to be about him coping with that. I want to bring up briefly the therapist character, because he is one of the more, I think, satirical characters in the movie at just like his sheer overwhelming incompetence.
Yeah.
Like he's the one.
My man straight up tries to cure schizophrenia with a peace bowl.
Yeah, with a Tibetan meditation bowl.
The singing bowl, yeah.
I will get back into that scene later because I love that scene. But even at the beginning, when Luke is going to him, he's like, yeah, I had this imaginary friend Daniel as a kid, but I haven't thought about him in years. And the therapist is like, well, maybe you should try to reconnect with that imaginative side. Like, maybe you should try to reconnect with Daniel. And it's like, who is this guy? Who gave this man his credentials?
Yeah.
That's such a bad idea.
Yeah, I was like, just like talk to him for a minute longer, like because clearly they hadn't been talking for very long when he gave him that suggestion. Because like if he'd just like spoken a little bit more about why he was feeling so fucked up, he would have mentioned that Daniel was the one who tried to convince him to like murder his mom when he was a child. And it's like, oh yeah, maybe don't reconnect with the mom murdering side of yourself. Just a thought, or like if you do like do it under supervision in like a safe place, but don't like fucking just go out in the world and like reconnect with your mom murdering side, please. I thought like there was some kind of fun potential too with like the Tibetan singing bowl too, because like like using that to banish like tulpas and like those concepts that are like
brain
greater
demons.
than yourself. Yeah, like or those like gods that you invent. And I like how that scene was subverted. I definitely like that.
Yeah, we'll get into that a bit more because I have some stuff to say, especially about the effects. On that scene. But yeah, Daniel is reintroduced after he goes back home, sees his mother has completely relapsed in terms of schizophrenia.
She has to be sent back to
covering her walls
institution.
with random book pages saying they're giving her messages.
Yeah, almost like a cartoonish level of schizophrenia. Because like this like large home and there's like all the walls have papers and scribbles and writings on them, and it's very overdone. But I do appreciate when she has her break later. That felt extremely genuine, and like it really gave me a start. Like when he looks down the staircase and like there's the shattered glass. And
she's going around breaking all the
me.
mirrors in the house. Well, and that's the first time Daniel reappears as well. So like once again, it's like that trauma that triggers it. I thought that scene is great where Daniel, she's got the shard of broken glass in her hand and Luke is trying to wrestle it away from her. Daniel's like, put it to your own throat. And he does and says, either let go of it or kill me. And that's what finally like snaps her out of it. It's like, man, that's really great. Like, I don't know if I would have thought to write something like that. And it's such a good way of letting you know, like right off the bat that like Daniel is a reckless motherfucker. I mean, he's the antithesis of Luke, which is what makes it the whole Jekyll and Hyde thing. He teaches him to be popular and how to talk to women and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, like I think that was one of the reasons I didn't like the beginning so much as well. Is like Luke's character like drove me up the fucking wall, like with the like super twee like shoegazy scene where like he has the teddy bear that he's talking to in his room before he goes to bed and shit, and just like the haircut and all of it. I was just like, man, this is just the last person to want to like be like caught dead or hanging around.
He's like such an NYU student though.
I know, and I hate it. Sorry for any NYU students listening, but
I think the trauma is too direct for Cleveland.
No, thank you. Like, it's just a little bit too like. I mean, probably because like I see a lot of like my younger self in that character also, and like I despise that. Like I'll be real.
That's the great thing about Daniel as a character is that he teaches Luke to exploit that mindset.
In a very like Tyler Durden kind of
Yeah, in a completely like self-aware way, like, you know, these people are you know, fools. You can play them, which is, I think, a great point of satire in the film, is just like being able to use people's pretentious bullshit against them to like fool them. I think is very, very fun. But you know, it's probably no surprise that Daniel starts getting extremely sinister very quickly, starts trying to take over his life. And I would like to talk briefly about, to segue us into the effects of the movie, about the scene where Daniel physically takes over
for the
Lucas
first
time.
Holy
in, like,
shit.
the tunnels, like under the school or whatever, where he and his
the steam tunnels.
Yeah, where he and his roommate take like the film girl and her friend, you know, to do drugs and fuck, and Daniel's like, here, let me take over for a minute.
Time
like
to
you're
drive.
Yeah, you're worried about your lady friend, like it's not cheating if it's me, right? And oh my god, all of a sudden, true body horror, just like out of the blue.
Really awesome effects work.
Incredible.
Yeah, I need to go back and watch it.
The perfect blend of CG and practicals. And like the really moody, like neon lighting, like helps disguise a lot of that too. But it looked so good. This moment of Daniel's face like contorting into like fleshy tendrils and latching on to Luke's face and then like physically changing spaces. It's like I had been laughing at a lot of the stuff in the movie up till that point.
Yeah, we were both when that happened, we're just like, jeez.
Whoa.
Well, that's what I like about the tone of this movie, is it's very funny and light, but when it hits with the horror, it really hits.
It hits very hard. Yeah.
I appreciate that, because it's like kind of a throwback to 80s and 90s horror.
Yeah,
in that,
absolutely.
you know, like it's not too self-serious, but like they took a lot of art and artifice and craftsmanship into really working on those effects and making sure they look primo.
Well, and they do some straight up Jacob's Ladder homage where he's at like parties and we'll start to see people around him as like monstrous demons and shit like that. I thought all of that stuff was done really well too. Like it didn't feel like a ripoff of Jacob's Ladder. It felt like a nod in just the right way. Like you said, Ben, they wear their influences on their sleeve, but it never feels like a cheap ripoff.
Because there's never like a singular influence. There's usually like several others
stacked,
like coming into play, and they make for a really nice quilt. Like, so yeah, I was quite happy with the. You know, I think it comes to a point where it's not just like wearing influences on its sleeve, like its jacket is made of influences.
Yeah.
But they look like a really cool jacket, so I don't mind.
Yeah.
Like, it's great.
Since we're talking about effects, I do want to talk about the effect in the Tibetan Bowl scene.
Yeah, let's get into that. This is a good time, because
because
most of my thoughts come about the twist of the film.
Yeah, because there's a scene where
The therapist tries to exorcise Luke's brain demons.
Yeah, like it's like some sort of like Rakshasa like possessing him or something. Like it's like his, you know, like is another like world perspective on having like multiple personality.
Yeah,
or,
trying to take
know.
a more Eastern approach. He comes over to Daniel's house and is like, you know, I'm gonna hypnotize you with the Tibetan meditation bowl, and then I have this dagger, you know, to stab the demons or whatever. And it's like at this point in the movie, it's like look at this clown again.
Yeah.
Like look at this absolutely incompetent loser.
And it's like also like you're kind of poo-pooing the movie a little bit too. It's like, we have to have like a shamanistic character.
Yeah,
Like, come on.
It feels a little bit like Orientalism, in kind of a bad way.
I mean,
but it's not like it's a New York academic like being an asshole, and it's commentary on that, which is why it works.
And the scene subverts it in like maybe the best way.
Oh, the best.
Because that's the scene when we find out that, contrary to the title, Daniel is real and super real. and he's not just a split personality, but a Lovecraftian void king who has spent centuries attaching himself to various people and making them go crazy so he can possess their bodies, so he can be physical, so he can be human.
So you can wear cool suits and have a smoke.
So he can, so he can have a Spider-Man 3 moment.
Yes.
Side note on that.
Yeah.
But the revelation of that in that scene where he's trying to tell Luke to like cast out his demons or whatever,
And his mouth starts expanding.
well,
Right, yeah.
not quite. Well, in momentarily, but first Daniel appears.
Yes.
In like in person, like to the
Yeah, just in like a simple pan over too.
to
It's
the therapist.
classy.
Yeah, and like that's that moment where it's like, oh fuck, this is not what we thought it was, and the psychiatrist freaks out as well, and Daniel goes over to Lucas, and because the psychiatrist has put him in a vulnerable, hypnotized state, he's able to fully possess him, and he does so by pulling open his mouth large enough to climb inside. And
Which that effect was
oh boy,
amazing.
Wow.
gross.
Yeah, just like wearing him like a flesh suit. Like,
and the
yikes.
sound, like the sound effects, like as he's pulling his mouth wider and wider.
I thought the practicals that they used for that were
oh
really
my
awesome.
god, yeah, just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, just watching him like clambering inside of him, like, yuck.
Yeah, it's really gross.
I like how they built towards Daniel being real as well, from like the scene before with him going to the prior shooter's father's house.
Oh yeah.
And seeing like the art that he drew, and it had Daniel's name on it.
Yeah.
And that was the big indicator, as well as these horrifying drawings.
Yeah, exactly.
I
It
love that
really hinted towards that stuff without making it too clear.
Right.
You know,
and then
what
the
the
next
hand was
and then
gonna
they
be.
confirm it right away
Yeah.
that like Daniel passed over to Lucas from the shooter at the beginning when he saw his body, and that's why there was that cut, which I think is such a great subversion because they build it in such a way that it is just like obviously, you know, a symptom of trauma, a split personality from trauma, and then that there's mental illness in his family, and so like all of the signs are there, and then to just like pull the rug out from under you and be like, nope, magic, bitch. Like,
Yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit after the film too, and like I was a little less like caught off guard by the fact that he was like an external force as opposed to an internal one, only because of like I think it was well enough established in like the thematic undertones. It wasn't ever like they never played their hand too hard, and it's the kind of thing that like what can be was very it was a very good subversion. I am trying to like pay credit to it, but like with like the opening shot being like this like astral vortex, you know, this very like astral grand entity of space, like that had me wondering like, okay, where's the grand element going to come into play? And so you see the stuff with Dane, it's like, okay, is he like something external, you know, is he invading him? And so like when that comes to fruition, it's good because that means it was well established. Like, and I appreciated that about it. Like, because like so many films, like they just try too hard to subvert, and it's not just about that in this
well,
context.
see, the interesting thing is that like I read the couple of shots of like the vortex as like metaphorical, as to be like representing
Like an eternal sunshine kind of situation.
as representing like the internal turmoil of the protagonist.
Luke's vortex.
Right, Luke's vortex.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
I read that as metaphorical, and you read it as more literal, and it keyed you into the actual twist, whereas I was much more taken aback by the twist because I had not been looking at it so literally.
And like I think honestly, like your perspective is the more valid one too,
Well, I mean, I
because
think
of like
it's-
the way the film is setting up like art and how we're looking
I
at
think
it
it's
and
nice
stuff, and it's
that
the
it
kind of thing that movie would do.
I think it's nice that it presents it in such a way that you can either look at it literally and be validated by it later, or you can look at it metaphorically and be surprised by it.
Yes.
You know, like they're both equally satisfying, I think, but it just depends on on how Ben. What about you? Because you didn't watch it with us.
I saw it more of an aesthetic choice and more of a metaphor, if anything.
Okay.
The film emphasized how stylistic it was.
Right, yeah.
So I saw it more of a throwback style choice, especially with the title card coming in, with it rotating into the name.
Well, and that shot too looked like a rotating matte painting as well. I don't think it was digital. It really felt
I think it was a matte painting, and
throwback.
it had digital effects on it. Like there was
Probably,
thunder in the clouds and stuff, if I remember. Like there is motion, like inside
Sure, but
of
it looked distinctly like something from the 80s when you looked at it. It looked like something, the kind of effects that you would see in something like The Dark Crystal.
Or what it reminded me of was the intro to in the 70s Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah.
The palette was very similar.
See, what was on my mind during it, and this was just recency biases, I had seen Uncut Gems just a couple days prior with the gem intro, psychedelic sequence, and it reminded me a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I'd connected the dots in terms of aesthetics there and took it much less literally because of it.
Sidebar on that, great fucking movie.
Fucking phenomenal movie, Uncut Gems. Back to the plot. After this, Daniel locks Luke in the same mind palace that he was locked in earlier, which I thought was very cool. Not only was it just a dope setting and a great opportunity to show off some more surreal shit, but also the fact that there were the mutated spirits of the other people that he had possessed running around the mind palace. Very fucking cool.
Yeah, all Jacob's laddery and shit. But I love the flesh mutated like in spikes off their faces. Yeah, it looked good.
I will say the one main monster in that area, it looked a little plasticky.
Oh, I kind of like that about it. It did look plasticky. I agree, but I thought
it looked a little cheap, only compared to the rest of the effects in the movie.
Honestly, it was one of my favorite because of that. Only because that sequence is in a mind palace. It's in a very it's in an artificial setting, so its own artifice fit the theme.
It didn't bother me too much, but I agree. It looked a little bit more artificial. Once Luke had incapacitated him and it was revealed that monster was the shooter from the beginning, and they sort of have their little conversation before Luke leaves. I think that is where you have more time to just sit with it and there's less movement, that the effect does look a little more plasticky. It didn't bother me too much. But I see where you're coming from.
I think the design of it is very clever. I think I really like how they introduce some of that with Sasha Lane's character uses Lucas as kind of a muse during the movie, and she paints a portrait of him, and in the background there's
the shadow,
and that's what she says she envisions his inner self to be, but he sees it very literal as Daniel, and later on when we see the creature, that those same
Daniel takes the same silhouette
horns is what we see as the monster.
I really liked that as well. I like when Luke escapes from the Mind Palace when he's after he's confronted the other monster, and he's breaking through the wall, and he's like, "What's through here?" And the guy's just the abyss. It's
straight up.
Oh my god.
We are past metaphors at this point, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, super literal Lovecraftian nonsense that I love so much.
It's my kind of nonsense.
Quick dip back to, now that we've revealed
Let's take a quick dip.
That the scene where Daniel, newly in Luke's body, goes on a shopping spree to get himself a nice suit.
Spider-Man 3 shopping spree.
Yes. Super Spider-Man 3 vibes.
I loved it though.
I loved it as well.
Same.
He was at Nick Cage levels of, giving it 110% and just pushing it way over the top.
I think he did a better job than Spider-Man 3.
Oh, frankly.
Yeah, easily.
Well, that's another reason why I want to give kudos to Miles Robbins, because at that point, it's Daniel, but it's Miles Robbins playing him because he's in his body, and to see the switch from him to go from Luke to Daniel, where he gets to really ham it up, super over the top,
He does a great job. You buy it.
Yeah.
You definitely buy it.
He does a good job, and just like him standing outside the shop, like really relishing
Smoking
that
a cigarette.
I loved that. I know. When we were first talking about after the movie, Cleve, you said that you had a bit of a problem that like this supreme astral being scope was a little bit limited.
The more time I've had to think on it, and after speaking with you about it, the more I've come around to love it.
Like, I actually really
hard
like,
right turn
I actually
from me.
really like that it's not like world destruction or like universal domination. Is that like he just wants to be human. He just wants to be able to experience physical reality. And they set that up really nicely before, like during the montage of Daniel like teaching him stuff and like doing things when they're at like the docks or whatever, and like Daniel's waiting in the water and Luke says, "How's the water?" and he's like, "I don't know." And I think that's like a really nice setup for like, yeah, he doesn't have any grander plans. He just wants to be
He wants to be human and cause chaos.
Yeah.
Physical.
Just an agent of chaos.
Yeah.
Really, really loved that. And I think that the perfect way to culminate the whole thing is with their sword fight on the roof.
Yeah, like when they were kids.
Great callback to them playing with the brooms as kids, sword fighting, and then they manifest actual swords through the power of imagination.
Yeah, it was delightfully campy in a way that works for this movie really well.
Very in that scene felt very shades of Scott Pilgrim, but like toned down a little bit, but still feels like it fits within the universe. It's the kind of thing that might have frustrated me in another movie, but for this felt like a really great way to do it, especially to have these two kind of over the top characters pair off and fight with fucking swords. It was a lot of fun.
I thought it was a ton of fun, and I thought that climax was done in a very satisfying way, especially with how they wrap it up. It's not necessarily a happy ending.
Well, no, I'd say it's quite a rather pessimistic ending. Because I mean, Luke dies, he sacrifices himself to kill Daniel, but then surprise, the cosmic nightmare monster isn't killed by falling off of a roof. Still alive at the end, still out here. It was satisfying. I think it's a little bit pessimistic, but it felt right for the movie. At least that.
I think that's all that Luke could do.
Yeah, he felt redeemed. It felt like a worthy ending to his arc, and that even though Daniel's still alive, you still take the small victory where you can, I guess. Time to rate?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I'll start, I guess.
Go for it.
I had a blast watching this movie. I thought the effects were great. I thought the style was really great. I thought the acting was super fun. Overall, I have very few bad things to say. I will say this movie verges on being not very woke in terms of its portrayal of schizophrenia at times.
I think the only like big saving grace is that it isn't schizophrenia.
Well, and also its saving grace is its tone. It's not very self-serious.
I think it's far. Yeah. I will say. I think that it does a far better job
than the
dealing
Fanatic
with mental health than the Fanatic does.
Or even Glass. Like I think the tone of this film was a lot more approachable.
I think the script of this movie was really clever in how it did that stuff, and in general, I think it introduced a lot of things that it wrapped up super well and super creatively throughout the film. It's a strong 4 out of 5 for me. It's really one to go check out. It's worth watching.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I really enjoyed this movie. It had all of the right references and homages to things that I liked without feeling cheap. Acting was solid, effects work incredible, very original story, a seemingly predictable narrative that takes a very unpredictable turn in a super satisfying way. I'm going to give it a strong 4 as well.
I really the only thing that's keeping it from being like a 5 from me is the first act. I was just like I get what they were trying to do now. At the time, I just because it's just there was a lot of like watching people be pretentious, yeah, not very academic. Like was just a kind of I know it was supposed to be obnoxious, but I just was kind of bored and felt obnoxious by it. But man, when the film fucking takes off, it flies. So no, strong 4 from me as well. Like the beginning sequences would be a lot more tolerable for me on a second watch, which I would gladly watch a second time.
All right. Well, that's a unanimous 4 out of 5 for Daniel Isn't Real. What, I mean, I think our ratings probably speak to this, but what was y'all's favorite of the 3?
Mine is Daniel Isn't Real.
Mine is also Daniel Isn't Real.
I liked elements of all 3 of them, though. I'm very happy with this
Then the
curation.
For you?
For me, yeah. I just which is funny because I do think that like Daniel Isn't Real is more me. Like if I had to choose like what kind of film like is more like Cleveland, then I would say, well, yeah, it's got the void, it's very colorful and wacky, and you know, like it doesn't keep its cards too close to its chest. It has fun. Like it's very stylized, and again, like big astral shot at the beginning. Everything I love. But God, I just them that follow. I don't know, just what a genuine character study. I just really fucking appreciated it, and you just I don't know. It's just so hard to come across like slow burn films like that now, and I can't really say how enough like how much I appreciated.
It's a marginal difference for me. I rated Daniel and Them That Follow the same, but I would put Daniel Isn't Real slightly above.
They're both very valid answers.
Probably the same answers, but an extension of that question is which of the 3 would you recommend to general audiences the most?
Daniel.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that if you see one of these movies, if you can only see one, I would say Daniel Isn't Real is the.
And you're just a regular streetwalker pleb. Yeah, go see Daniel. You know, but if you're an academic, you know, if you can really appreciate the finer things, then go watch Them That Follow, because I'm better than you.
Is Them That Follow the pleb filter?
No, God, no, absolutely not. Like what you fucking like. I don't give a shit. They're both equally valid.
Well, yeah, this was a solid curation. I enjoyed things about all of these movies.
Like, once again, great fucking picks, man.
Yeah.
Good job, Ben.
When halfway through the year comes along and I'm winning, I'll pick 3 good ones again.
We'll see.
God damn
we'll
it.
See. Well, that will
Very heel of you to say.
that will once and for all lay 2019 to rest. As much as we would love to live in those bygone yesterdays of 2019, it's time for us to look forward.
And forward we will. We have a bunch of new movies in the next month.
Yes, we do.
Movies that I'm actually kind of excited for.
Several that I'm quite excited for.
Yeah.
Our next week's episode will be on the new Grudge film, which I wish I could say I was more excited for. A lot of the preliminary reviews have come in.
I haven't been paying attention.
I won't say anything.
Reviews.
I will say that.
I won't say anything, but I'm going to say this.
As far as I know, none of us have seen either the original Japanese film or the American remake.
I have not, no.
Nope.
So this is all of our first Grudge experience.
Yeah. So you guys haven't seen... Oh, awesome. Okay,
So
cool.
this is
For once, I'm not the only one under the rock.
No, this is
Yes.
gonna be our first exposure to the Grudge franchise in general. So tune back in next week to hear how that goes. I will say it is fuck you. It's January, so every movie I watch this month, I will be going into that.
The healthy dose of skepticism.
I mean that
Healthy
trailer
dose of
sure
skepticism.
does show a lot.
Well, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get more into that next week, but yeah, that should bring us to the end of this week's episode.
This episode sponsored by Granny Danzen's Spooky Mansions. You got a problem, you throw it in that dollhouse.
Yep.
There you go.
Stuff it down with brown.
There you go. Granny, whatever the fuck I said, that's our sponsor. There you go.
All right. Well, that'll bring us to the end of this week's episode. It was a long one.
End of the decade.
And the end of the decade, and only looking forward from now on. Pod Boys in 2020, join our legions.
For we are numbers.
You look like you have something you want to say.
Oh no, I just saw a cute meme on my phone.
Okay, all right,
We're good.
We'll address that. Well, if you're still with us in this new year, in this new decade, then consider going on to Apple Podcasts and leaving us a 5-star rating and nice review, or wherever else you get your podcasts, and you can do that. Do it. You can follow us on Twitter at PodPeoplePod for occasional updates into things and stuff.
Wait, I'm sorry, I missed that. What is that? Pod Pickle Pod?
Pod Pickle Pod on Twitter.
Cool.
You can also follow us on Letterboxd at Pod People Pod for the list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those episodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Deep State Aussie.
I'm at Mr. Sheets on Twitter.
And occasionally I'm on twizzling about with Light Arc Studio. It stares back.
Yep. Buy the game. It's on Steam, $6 in early access.
Get it.
Get it. I guess slight plug off of my Twitter. If you want to see other lists that I have put together for the end of the year, the end of the decade, I posted all that shit on Twitter. I've got a top 50 films of the decade, top 100 albums of the decade. If you're interested in that kind of thing, Deep State Aussie.
I'm on Letterboxd at Mr. Sheets if you want to see my list of the best movies of the year and the decade as well.
I'm a pleb streetwalker, so I don't have one of those, but you can always check out my work on ArtStation. Just type in old Cleveland Mosier, and you see all those cool arts.
Type in Cleveland Mosier, not old Cleveland Mosier.
I mean,
while it's an accurate,
try it, see what happens.
While it's
I
an
don't know.
accurate descriptor, I don't know if it'll get you to the right link.
Old Cleveland Mosier.
All right, well, 2020, we're here for you. Hopefully, you won't take us down with you.
Oh,
All
God.
right, tally ho, boys. Choo choo.